video of the Baylor, some people, guys from the Baylor Men's Choir singing in Africa. Cross-cultural music experience that you would highlight? What are some things that you noticed in that video that, what did you notice? Yes?
Well, you've got Americans, quote unquote, singing their songs instead of their own songs, and so it brings them closer together.
Okay. So this group of students took a song from Kenya back to Kenya. This was from Kenya, and this is Swahili, so they were taking that to Kenya. Yeah, what else? Thank you. Okay, there was a connection, and everybody was happy, and everybody was fulfilled in the experience.
Well, it was. You could see them melting. I mean, when they started, they weren't sure about it, and they were very reserved, and then it really melted them as it went along and created that bridge. And,
yeah. And initially, this is a group of schoolgirls, and so I didn't know this video existed until I asked Bryce to find some videos from some previous trips, and this was somewhere out there, and Bryce found it. So I actually didn't know this experience happened. But obviously, at first there was a reticence, and then eventually there was a connection, and then there was some movement, and eventually some singing, and greater connection that happened as we went along. Yeah. What else?
It almost seemed like the girls knew the song. They were singing along.
Okay. This song in Kenya is kind of like Amazing Grace in our culture or something. It's kind of a song everybody knows. I mean, people will know that. There will be a little bit of difference in how the movements go and all that, and even variations within this group. But it's kind of a song a lot of people know and will jump in.
They seemed surprised about it turning around every time the voice did.
Yeah.
But there was one who finally turned around with them. And I don't know what that word meant.
Yeah. Yes?
Well, I actually know this song in English. Anyway, I was singing it, I was like, I know this song.
Okay.
I don't know in that language, but I know it in English.
Yeah. I actually recently heard some people singing a different version in Zulu, for like a South African version of the same song. So, in the English, I've sung the English version, but it's been so long now I forgot.
There's no one like
There's no one like Jesus. There's no one like you. Yeah, it goes on like that. But that's what the song is about. There's no one like Jesus. And the emotions are significant. What else did you notice about that?
Joy.
Okay, lots of joy and sharing. Yeah.
There's shared laughter among
Yeah.
the group, and those who were singing weren't afraid to join in that and make a fool of themselves, for lack of a better way to say that.
Yeah. Okay. It was memorized, right? Okay. And it was confident that these guys could sing it a cappella, they could jump in, they found a pitch that worked. It's really probably pretty close to the pitch that we usually sing in it. All of that is really good. One of the things that pleased me about Bryce's finding this video is that I didn't know that this actually happened. This was an experience that a group of men's choir guys did, but I didn't actually orchestrate this. I didn't say, guys, here's some girls, go sing to them. Go make this. I don't even know where this was. I was trying to figure out exactly that setting. I guess it was at the girls' school.
It's where we painted, so it's outside where we're going.
Yeah, that's right, because our son and I were watching it together, and he said, well, Dad, there's paint on their clothes. And so we did a painting project, and this was the girls' school, and I think that's where it happened. But it pleased me that these guys were connecting in a way that they were free to do, and they did, and they knew the power of music to connect and just did it. Brennan.
It's also really neat. I wasn't a part of that group, but I've learned that song through men's choir. And over the summer, I worked at Johnny and Friends Special Needs Ministry, and we had people visiting from Brazil and from Kenya to learn how to start their own Johnny and Friends Special Needs Ministry in their respective nations. And I was able to, there was a pretty large group from Kenya, and I was able to sing this song with them and with the whole, attempt to teach it to the rest of the congregation. But
yeah. This has been the most cross-culturally, the song that has crossed cultures the easiest of anything I've ever done. Because now mission groups from Baylor have taken this to Malaysia. We've taught it to folks in Malaysia. We've taught it all over the place. We taught it in South America, and people pick up on it so it travels really, really easily. So it's a song that's become a tradition for the Baylor Men's Choir, which is the group that I direct. We did it at a flash mob a couple of years ago, and it became almost a viral thing. And it got all over Kenya. I mean, it got into Kenyan circles, and then it stayed out there for about 6 or 8 months and kept getting likes and comments for months and months and months. And probably, probably 50, 75 different comments on the song from just a flash mob that the Baylor Men's Choir did here on campus.
I just wanted to say to you that the fact that the Americans were dancing, it was very interesting because in Africa generally, whenever they're singing, there's a lot of dancing and a lot of motion. They're not stiff, and so the fact that they got it and they did that, it brought a lot of connection. Yeah.
Most cultures in the world don't stand still when they sing like we do. It's just not the case, but especially in Africa. I just came back from Kenya 15 days ago or something like that. And I told the group that we traveled with, there just is no standing still. You have to move. You've got to have something going on in your body. Let's look at our handout for a second. How does music function as cross-cultural engagement? This is a huge topic. There's so many different things we could talk about. But to highlight a few, I think we all know that it does. We all know that there's a cross-cultural connection to music. Many of us have watched it, we've been a part of it, we've been privileged to be a part of it. But how does it work? Music is present in every culture, and it's utilized in every major life event. If we were writing or talking about the subject rites of passage, we would know that music is present in all rites of passage and weddings and funerals and all major movements in life. Music plays a role. Even in birthday celebrations, right? How many times do families and odd gatherings of people sing together? Pretty much birthday is one of the only places in our culture, other than church, where we actually sing together. But that's an example of how it works cross-culturally. The ability to influence both the head and the heart. Music infuses our hearts and our souls, but it also is a part of our head. And so music has multiple ways to enter our body, as I think about it. I think of entering, I'm singing, I'm hearing, I'm moving, I'm engaging, I'm reaching out, people are reaching out to me, all these different ways that music has of connecting to us. And I think, I hope our worship service that we were part of just a bit ago had that head and heart space. And I don't know about you, but I'll just go say this little aside. I am at a place in my life where I'm not just interested in what goes into my head. I really want my heart to worship also. And I want to worship with my whole self. I want to feel. I want to have all a deep, resonant kind of worship. It breaks down barriers. Somebody's already said that about this particular thing, that it breaks down barriers. We usually trust people who are vulnerable enough to sing. Have you ever thought about it? You know, if somebody's got the guts to stand up there and just sing their heart out, something about you says, you know, I think I could trust that person. A person is very open. How vulnerable do you have to be to sing? Have you thought about that before? Mm-hmm. We do it all the time, right? Most of us in the room, we sing in front of people, we stand up, we lead, we put our voices out there. But how vulnerable is it for people who are not used to doing that? Yeah. It is arguably the most vulnerable thing that we can do. That it's probably among the very most vulnerable things that we can do in our whole life, because it's very, very personal. And it's like being completely open. Okay? So it's that sort of experience. And so when you're willing to just put that out there, people can trust you. And most of the time, you know, even children trust people who sing, right? How many mean people sing? You know, at least. I don't know. That's a question to ask. But I just think normally that's not the case. I think you can trust people who sing. Music moves us from the periphery to the center. And I put here that music draws us in. There's this particular experience. You could tell that there was a beginning of music moving people from standing back. And I bet if that had gone on for just a few minutes more, what do you think might have happened? That invisible line between the girls in the green and the guys would have broken down. There is another video out there somewhere of a Baylor group where we started singing and dancing, and then the line was moved, and we all worked together, and everybody was involved in the singing, and there was no division at all. And that's when you know it works. That's when you know it's really, really, really taken, when somehow it's all connected. One of the ways that I think music works cross-culturally is it involves the full body. There's the physical commitment that is inherent in singing and playing. And we just talked about that with our bodies. But when you sing with a group today, does it occur to you that we were all breathing together? And that there were about 350 of us that were mostly taking breaths at the same time in the room together. Now, when have we done anything that was that synchronized? Maybe if you go to yoga or Zumba or something like that, you know, and I weren't present, there's some synchronization going on in movement. But even then, those are small groups. So there's such a synchronicity that goes on when we're all together and we're all doing the same thing. And it's very physical. I'll just tell you a story today. In rehearsal, after we did the All Hail the Power the first time, when we actually got to the singing part, I was so out of breath, I really couldn't sing the first time through in the rehearsal. And I thought, okay, I've got to breathe deeper, and I've got to manage my adrenaline a lot more effectively when we do this in the worship service. Because music is so physical, and most of us don't think about that, you know, because we just do it. We don't think about it until we have a shoulder that's out of whack, or, you know, our carpal tunnel, or something that keeps us from doing the movement that we're used to doing. And then suddenly we realize how physical it really is to be a musician. The communal aspect of music making sends the message that all are welcome. There's a communal thing that just says, you're welcome in this place. And I think that we saw that in the video. An effective means of hospitality, and I mentioned that there's a book I have that has a section on embracing hospitality. It has a whole section on the call to be missional, which is part of what we're talking about. It has a section on community and a section on becoming multi-musical. And by multi-musical, we mean being able to function in different musical environments, being able to move from one musical environment to a different one. Were there multiple musical environments that we were crossing today in the worship time? Okay. Yeah, and
jazz.
yeah, certainly the people playing instruments were crossing in a big way, but the rest of us were too. We were going from like popular kinds of Christian songs to New Orleans jazz to full-bodied hymn singing with organ and brass, and then back to a more reflective hymn setting, and we were all kind of all over the place. And we're going to do some more of that kind of multi-musical travel in the next couple of days. And the last thing I read, actually a student, I had several students read this paper in the last few days, and one of the students said, well, it empowers and equalizes. And that needs to be in there, is what one of those students says. So how does music empower? How do we feel empowered by music? Or have you seen someone be empowered through music?
It gives you an avenue to express.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How many of your lives have been just changed in a radical way by how music has empowered you as maybe a shy person or a reticent person or person from a place where not a lot of experiences came your way? Music can empower us in so many ways. There are 4 guys in here that have been on trips with Baylor Music and Missions, which I lead, and I'm going to ask them at different times if they want to just tell a little quick anecdotal story. I sent the word out if any of the students were not in other sessions and you've been on one of the trips, come to this one so you can chime in with a little story here and there. So if something comes to mind of one of these expressions, let us know. Okay. Let's just watch another one of the videos, and we'll just keep kind of putting them along. Why don't we do? There's another one from Kenya, right? Or no, that's the only one. Let's look at the one where the class does the Hallelujah. This is in El Salvador. This is with a group of school children at a school in El Salvador. In that video. Is Hallelujah, Amen anybody's language, or Alleluia, Amen? Well, it's Latin, basically, or I don't know, I guess, actually. But it's neutral, okay? So it's something that we all can sing in any language. So it works cross-culturally. What else?
Well, I had them doing opposite equal. I mean, it was not an easy song, like you just didn't sing this little Alleluia song. You had part of them doing one thing, part of it, and that gives them the thought, hey, I'm good at this. Yeah.
Yeah, I chose that one because of the empowering thing. Is the reason I thought we'll put that one here. Because what is that song doing to empower those children?
Gave them confidence to
Yeah,
to do something different.
yeah. And success, right?
Yeah.
And doing something that was different, that was two parts, that was something else. They were also empowered because they were pleasing the teacher. Did you notice how their teacher was involved with them?
Yeah.
That was the woman. She was the best teacher. We were in this big school with, I don't know, 20 classrooms or something. We were traveling we had about 10 groups traveling from one classroom to the other every 30 minutes throughout the day. So we had covering tons of ground. But this was the one teacher who absolutely did not just sit down at her desk and catch up on her paperwork. She was involved in everything, and she made it so helpful so much. There's a lot of educational stuff we could say about the way the students were involved and the way they were leading differently. I was so proud of them for how they caught on to all that and did it also beautifully. But there are a lot of cross-cultural things and about the ability for music to empower. Can you imagine these children going home and singing this?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
They might even teach their parents.
Absolutely. If you've had children in your home, or you know children, we all do, a music education teacher of mine once said, you know that music has impacted the life of a child when the child takes the music onto the playground. So I've always been the person who listens out for the music to be taken on the playground. Then you know that music has found its way into life. Now, if you put that on the adult level, and we think about Sunday morning and the songs we sing, what would be the equivalent of the playground for adults that come to worship on Sunday?
They take it home to their houses, their home, family homes.
Yes, and to their workplace even. Okay, so when people say, you know, the song we sang last Sunday, I've been singing that all week, then that is the best compliment that we ever receive as worship leaders, because the song has moved from the formal worship time to being impactful in the life of the people that are singing it. Yeah. What about when I teach college students on campus? What makes me the happiest about the songs we sing? When outside my door, which is closed, I hear one of the men's choir guys singing something from rehearsal. Or I'm going back from rehearsal singing something every day that we've sung. I mean, it's totally great. And then I find another person singing in the hall singing the same thing. And then I know that music is embedded into lives and that music is changing the way we live, not just for a moment. Okay? All right, let's keep moving here. How did we come to see missions as a not so effective term? So we don't use the term missions in a lot of our churches nearly the way that we used to. We still use it around Baylor because it communicates to a lot of people in a way that there is no other word quite that does because of historical context. But mostly by the failure of the missions movement to share the gospel without also exporting its cultural trappings. And what we mean there is that the missions movement as we know it didn't just export the gospel, it didn't just tell the news of Christ, but we also told it within a Western environment. So we embedded it oftentimes into a Western environment without realizing the culture that it was now going to take place in, or going to become home in. And so it caused many places in our world to associate the message exclusively with the form. And then it didn't always translate into new experiences. Okay?
I have a question.
Yeah.
When we did that, did it seem like we were forcing our culture on their culture? And that's not what we wanted. You wanted, the mission was not the culture, the mission was the Christian faith or whatever.
Right.
And that's why it turned so bad.
Yes, yeah, and then it became, because then it was a dominant culture and a non-dominant culture. And so the idea was that we have the news to share with someone else who does not have this word, and one culture trumps the other culture instead of an exchange. So whenever I first started taking Baylor students on these mission trips, whatever we want to call them, about 10 years ago, it took me the whole semester. The students kept saying, so how are we going to share our faith? And when are we going to have a chance to witness to people And what are we going to do to share, to witness? And they were really meaning, how many people are we going to win for Christ, and how many, gate tabs or whatever are we going to, we're going to notch up. And I kept saying, I bet we're going to have a chance to share our faith. I know we are. But we're going to be going there to live among people and be living among them. And we're actually going to learn some stuff ourselves. I bet we're going to come back changed. Okay. And so that's not so much the dominant mentality now among younger people. That's really not the way they think about things so much. But from the guys in the back, and Bryce, the word that we always hear is, what I didn't expect was that I was going to be the one changed more than I think anybody else was changed through my going. Yeah, that's what I hear over and over and over. So, other things, failure to offer imaginative ways for the gospel to enculturate into contexts that are non-Western. It is very interesting how much our congregations here in the United States, it's very interesting how much the message becomes the way we do things, or the way we do something actually is completely embedded in the message itself. I'm not saying that very well. Okay, here's an example. I will give an example from our congregation. A few years ago, our staff, it's a pretty innovative little crowd of people on our staff. We decided to do a communion service for, we were also celebrating missions and people traveling from our church and all this stuff. And having to be a communion Sunday. So we decided, rather than using bread and juice, that we would use rice and green tea to do the Lord's Supper. So that you would come by, take a spoonful of rice, and have a little cup of tea. And this would be, because we had some Asian stuff going on with people from Asia who had been on a mission. Well, we as a staff thought, wow, this is going to be, because rice is the bread of Asia, all of that kind of stuff. And, juice is not such a big thing, but, tea. Anyway, we thought, this is going to be really great. Wow, I just thought, oh my gosh, experiencing something so very, very different and having to think in a different way. When we put this out to our deacons, who were the ones who started this, and it took about 30 minutes, and it was like, wow, I don't think I'm going to participate this week. I'm not willing to lead in this. And then we had also asked them to bring the crock pots of rice and stuff like that. And they were not signing up and whatever. So after about a day, through email, the staff decided, well, maybe we ought to dial this back, and we ought to say, let's talk about this. So we agreed to talk about this at a future deacons meeting. I was very surprised, even in this church where people are real smart, and thoughtful, that we were not able, many of the people, a number of people in the room, were not able to think that bread and juice is really not sacred, but the meal is. Now that might be hard for some of you too. And I'm not saying I was just, immediately jumping that way, but I was like, I need to be forced to get my head around some different way to do it, you see. But it was very interesting, and it was a great study in how people are attached to the way in which something is done instead of the meaning of what is done. That is, I learned a lot from that experience because I learned that that is so embedded into our consciousness. And while that one wasn't as big a jump for me, I bet you could come up with something that would also get my ire up too. I don't know what, but I bet you could come up with something.
It's fascinating because even in our faith religion, some do bread and juice, some do bread and wine, some do wafer. It's all different in our own situation.
We did have in the last few years tried different breads, and we've done tortillas, and we've done a lot of different things, but we've not done rice and crock pots. And we just have not done that one, and but I haven't forgotten. Yeah.
Still may happen.
A cousin of mine at a reunion a few years ago said, he said, years ago, Mama told me that a lot of people are going to have to die before some things happen. Things change in our church. And then he said, but it didn't occur to me that it was going to be me. And meaning that we're all hindrances to something. It would be helpful for us, though, to know some of the things that we are hindrances to, so that by the grace of God we might actually do something about them. Yeah. Okay, moving on. So what terms are better? What terms are better for us than missions? Cross-cultural engagement might be something, I don't know. There are lots of things, and maybe that's beyond the scope of today. How do we become to see missions? Sharing of cultures and God stories in which our God view is enhanced. That's what I think it might be better stated as. The sharing of cultures and God stories in which our God view is enhanced. I believe that the more we see God through the perspective of someone else, the greater our God becomes. Our God view is enhancing. I've also come to believe that one of the goals of our Christian faith and of our discipleship is for the God view that we have to be constantly expanded. And I think when that God view stops being expanded, then our faith is maybe shrinking a bit. Yeah, Brendan.
I can testify to that a little bit because I had been on previous mission trips with my church, my home church back in high school, but they were more evangelical missions. And so this Malaysia trip this last summer was my first cross-cultural engagement experience where we were singing with other congregations. And it definitely made, coming from a small town in rural Texas where, God bless the USA, and that's all we think about. And then, to have this whole new world opened up to me, not necessarily from an evangelical standpoint, but from a global church standpoint, just made God so much bigger.
Yeah, thank you. So, missions travel or missions vacation. There's a lot of talk about that. If you want to Google that, missions vacation on the internet, you'll be shocked at how many hits you'll get. There's a lot of stuff about all of that. It's often controversial and it's often been questioned about why we should go somewhere and do what we do, why should we spend this money, is it valid to do that, etc. There's also a term that we hear around some called voluntourism. So it's volunteer, but it's tour because you're actually going somewhere, and it's a little twisted term. There's also a term called poverty vacation. You can Google that. You can find a lot about vacationing in a poverty-stricken place. So some ways that I would say, one is to always return to every mission site multiple times and avoid one-time visits. It's really important when we go to a place that we go back. And then they know that we're not just the people who came and offered something once and then never thought of them again. And we, in a sense, got the what's a good word, sort of the thrill or the newness or the whatever from the experience, but then never came back. With the mission experiences that we've done here at Baylor, we've been to Kenya now 5 times, we've been to Malaysia 3 times, we've only been to El Salvador once. But we try to go back, and sometimes I think, well, maybe our students need some different experiences. But when you take a student for 4 years, if the student gets the same experience twice, and you see the connection, and you go back the next time, and you actually are meeting the people that you saw the last time, there's something incredibly important about that. So one of the commitments that I would encourage you to make is you can't always go back, because sometimes it doesn't go that well, and it might not be the right fit. Yeah, Brendan.
And also, for example, in Malaysia, we have a student at Baylor that went on music mission trips that now lives over there and leads over there. So
we have a student who the last time was so engaged with Malaysia decided to go back. And a church there said, we'd love to have someone come and help us in our church. And so this student, I really had this sense that this student found he was more comfortable sometimes there than he might be here. And so he's gone back now and has lived there for a year, came home for a month, and went back. And interestingly, just 2 days ago, announced on Facebook that he's in a relationship with this woman in Malaysia. So Who knows? We also had a student that went back to Kenya and served for a year. And it looks like we might have some more. Build solid relationships, connections, and partnerships. So practical insights. When you're doing a trip, planning a trip of this sort, local contacts are the key to an effective trip. The effectiveness of your trip will have to do with the people that you connect with on a local basis. Long-range planning is a must. 18 to 24 months is really good for the first time. Now, when you've been to a place before and you're going back, it doesn't take as long to plan the trip because you already know people and you know how to get things done and you know where to go and all that. I'm working on the possibility of taking a group, the Veteran Men's Choir, back to Kenya. We were there 3 years ago, but by next spring it will have been 4 years actually. And we're working on that right now, but I have already done a huge amount of legwork for that. So actually I was working on that trip before I took the last trip. And it takes a lot of long-term planning. I would encourage you that a preliminary visit is worth the expense. And that is, if you're doing a new place, go visit the place before you take a group of people. El Salvador was a new place for us. We were going to have another plan 2 years ago, and that kind of got preempted by some other world events, and we ended up going to El Salvador. But I spent 3 days in El Salvador, and that was time well spent. It was very, very time very well spent. It's expensive, and sometimes you think, how could I afford to go when we're ahead of time, when we're trying to take the whole team? But I do encourage you to do that if in any way possible. Utilize a team in planning is something I've learned through the years. A trip like this is too big a thing for you to plan yourself. If you're doing a trip for your church, get a group of folks together and meet with those people every week. When I'm planning a trip with students this fall, I will have a team of about 3 to 5 students, and I will meet with them every single week to work on this trip for the entire school year. So the team planning aspect is huge. Consult with seasoned travelers for best practices. Don't reinvent the wheel yourself. Learn from people who have traveled a lot and learn what they know. If you're interested in a trip like this sometime, send me an email and I'll just put a whole bunch of documents in an email and send them to you. Because I have a lot of things like trip suggestions that I give out to groups and all kinds of things. And every year I change them and add more things because I learned stuff from the last trip. So much experience that you can count on. Be sure the location and the activities are a good fit for the group. Not every location is a great fit for every team. I recently, just 2 weeks ago, was in Kenya. For the first time, this was not a Baylor group. This was just a pickup group of people. There were my wife, our son, and I went, and then 19, of our friends. 19 other people, so people from different places around the country met. I put this out on Facebook last fall, and none of you saw it, so you didn't go, but otherwise, lots of people went, and it was a great trip. But the oldest person was 76, and the youngest person was 10. So that was a very different travel experience than taking a group of college students. And it meant that we didn't camp out in Kenya. We decided that sleeping on the ground, which I'm not such a big fan of anymore, was probably not the best thing for this group. We had 3 or 4 people, 3 people over 70, I think, 69 and 3 70-somethings. And then we had every age and all kinds of people. So it was a very different sort of trip. And I put a lot of time into trying to be sure that there was great possibilities for engagement for all the different age groups. And so be sure it's a good fit. Choosing music. Let's play another couple of videos here. Let's do the one of teaching Satu Suara. We're teaching them, these students have all taken a music reading class, and now we're teaching them a song in 4 parts. experience? Do we have a bunch of people helping to
Yeah,
ensure success?
with each part.
We had each part surrounded by students that knew the part. And again, they were so engaged and so on task, which is really great. I was standing over here kind of looking. I'm sorry. I was trying to think, what in the heck are we going to do next? Okay, because the student that was in charge of this really wanted us to work on this, and the local leader said it would be great if we could all sing something in parts. If our people could sing in 4 parts, I think we could do that in the future. If we could ever make this jump into that. So I said, we can do this in an hour. In one session, I know we can learn a song in 4 parts. And I was trying to plan to absolutely be assured it was going to happen. And be sure that it was really, really going to succeed. Because all these people had taken, this was the one place that we've ever been where everybody in the whole place wanted to take the music reading class, which was wonderful. I mean, music reading was the music reading kids teaching that just never had this kind of interest before. I'll play the one where we're all actually singing it on the evening or I think this is like a dress rehearsal kind of thing before an evening, sort of a sharing session we did.
You kept telling us over and over and over again the kind of connection we were going to have with those people whenever we started singing in their language, and I just did not understand it. I had never been on an international mission trip, and I was a freshman before the summer of this trip, and we went to Lebanon and we sang in front of all of these combined churches, and I think we sang 3 or 4 of our English selections before we sang Sakuswara, and I just remember that being a life-changing moment, like standing up there on stage, and we were all trying to share 2 mics, but then it was like the whole energy in the room changed in like a snap. It was just like, you would have thought you would have been, I don't know, I don't mean to say this negatively, but like, it went from the energy, I guess, in a funeral to like you were at a rock concert and all of like 0 to 10 seconds. Like it was just like we were singing in their language and meeting them in this unique, unexplainable way. And I've never experienced anything like that. And that was very moving. And the church that my group had partnered with, out of the bands, I just remember the reverend that we were working with was like crying on the front row, and I was just sitting there like, this is really like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is why music is important, because it speaks to the soul, to other people in this unique way that is beyond, it transcends words.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, when you sing in someone else's language, immediately everything changes. I mean, it's exactly like Lucas said. And I said it every week in rehearsal. Why aren't we working on Baha Malay, which is the language, the official language? Why do we keep on doing all of this Malay stuff when it's so hard? And yet when we get there, it's all worth it. It's really worth it once we're there. Yeah.
Any thought to having one of the locals doing the drums, one of the drums, to teach them some of the drumming?
Yeah, and we did have a drumming class, and I don't remember why we did a whole bunch of stuff at some point, their folks did, but this was sort of a choral thing, so that's why we had our folks on.
If
I remember correctly, we had a lot of the drum classes working with the trap set and not the cajon so much.
Yeah.
But
How do we end up having 2 violins? Did we recruit for 2 violins?
Yes.
Well, those are the people that signed up for the trip, though, you see. And then we did, you use
What you got?
You use what you got, yeah. Here's what you got, therefore you write for that. We wrote parts for what we had. Student wrote the arrangement of this. We had the tune, wrote the arrangement, all these pieces we just put together because it's what you have, and it's what you do. Yeah.
Yeah, so you learn the language, the songs here in the language, and then you learn that and taught them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, they already knew the song, that song. They didn't know one of the other songs, but they knew that song, but they didn't know how to sing it in parts.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were teaching them how to sing in 4 parts. But the point was not teaching them that song in 4 parts. The point was helping them to learn to get harmony in their ear so that they could sing something else in the future. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Did you teach it by rote then, or did you show them?
No, they had the music, and we showed them from their music class.
Okay.
Here's where it is, here's what's going on.
Have they ever read?
They had never read music at all.
Okay, so it was like basically you're teaching them.
Yeah, they had been through like 2 levels of music reading, like beginning and not so beginning. Yeah. All right, choosing music. So to be cross-culturally engaging, choose music that is flexible and portable. Consider unaccompanied songs with portable instruments. So if I've learned anything, it's if you travel to Africa, sing a cappella. I have only seen 1 piano in my 6 trips to Africa. I'm sure there are pianos in Africa, but I've only seen 1 of them, and I've been in a few different places. And that's not anything except just don't plan for it. And then some cultures don't plan for a lot of electrical outlets. So be very portable, have music that is, you can sing anywhere. If you can sing it just like that quickly, then you can encounter a lot of people. But if you have to just do formal concerts, then you'll always take all your time setting up. And then by the time you set up, the people are gone. So be willing and able to be portable. Don't expect traditional instruments, we already said that. Choral music must be primarily homophonic. That means not lots of parts and not lots of, just very straightforward. This little group, this pickup group I just recently took to Kenya, they were not a group of musicians intentionally. But we learned some songs, and what I learned with them is even though I tried to simplify the music, I should have simplified it even more. So I should have brought the temper, just kept bringing in the difficulty level to be extremely straightforward. Smaller instruments are desired. So the smaller the instrument, the better, the more portable it is and the easier it is. Consider cost of traveling with instruments. Sometimes you have to pay for instruments. Some airlines charge, some don't. Some will let you carry everything on, and they're incredibly gracious. Some are not gracious at all. And so be prepared to pay and hope that you won't have to. Consider instruments from the culture. A few years ago, we were in Malaysia, and we noticed a set of gongs over in the corner covered with dust. We asked a lot of questions about the gongs, and they said, oh, they're kind of old school, nobody plays those anymore. Well, how do you play them? We asked questions and all that. We eventually put the gongs with some songs that we did, and then now we hear that community is using gongs to play along, because someone else has empowered them to use their indigenous instruments, which for them were old, outdated, and not relevant. Okay. Recorded accompaniments are discouraged because, again, you're not teaching people how to play and do music, and live music always goes over in every culture I've ever been in. Plan for minimal setup. We said that memory is strongly encouraged. If you can memorize things, you can be so flexible. We've come up with this system that we have little cheat cards, and everybody has a little stack of cards that they carry around in their pocket. And until we get them memorized, you can at least use the memory cards. But it's a lot different than pulling out a big folder and unpacking your stuff. But those memory cards are really helpful. Consider maintaining an inventory of older or less valuable instruments for travel. We've been trying to buy some instruments around here so that if the guitar gets broken, it will be a school guitar rather than a personal guitar. And so students have, we're trying to figure that out a little bit more. Utilize the music of the host culture. Let's quickly go through that. Nothing communicates more than valuing someone's music. Sing and present the music of the culture, even if the music is not presented with the nuance that you desire or that you would prefer. Sometimes we don't do things that are multicultural because we say, well, we're not them, we don't really know, why did I get the pronunciations right? You know, just like historical music performance practices. Well, I'm not going to do any, you know, Bach because I don't really have everybody to do exactly right. Well, pooey on that, you know, do the music, give it a stab. I have never been to another culture where people said, I wish you hadn't sang our music because you just butchered it. And your pronunciations were so bad. You know, I have always asked the people there, could you help us with our pronunciations? And we have the one host in Malaysia who is, you know, she'll say, it's really not working. It's just pretty bad. And, you know, she loves to correct us and, you know, all this stuff. And we give her that privilege of correcting us. But it's okay, because is that not a gift right there? Is it not a gift to let someone help you improve what you do from the culture? Yeah.
Well, in a real world situation there, I've been a teacher and retired now, but I sing in Spanish. Well, I'm not Spanish, so I don't like, and these little children are just laughing because I'm trying to sing in Spanish, but they think it's the funny, you know, the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah. Well, in my music education training, years ago I did Kodai and ORF certification and did a lot of work in that area. And one of the things that I have said to students through the years is just because your hand signs are bad and you mess up the syllables, still do it with children. The children will be happy to correct you. And they will help you learn it. And it's really that way in church, too. If we only do the things we're comfortable with, we won't ever do those other things. So let the people help you, yeah. If you're not very good with languages, let someone else help with the language. There's a student, Adam Cagliano, is very good with languages. And so the last couple of years, I've just let Adam help with languages because he's so much more intuitively gifted than I am. And I finally got to a place in my life where I'm okay with that. You know, I'll get it, but it'll take me many, many more repetitions than it will take most of the students. I would usually be the last one to really get it. Yeah, Brendan.
And it's always so much better to be a listener in that particular, you know, if you're ever in a situation where you're being taught a language and someone knows it better than you do, it's always better. You just need to be so attentive because you can miss something like that, and then that can strain relationships if it's in a choral setting or.
Yeah. Just because we're in charge, we don't have to do everything. If you didn't learn anything else today, you can still be in charge, but you don't have to do it all. You really don't. Choose a variety of music, not just taking music of a culture back to them, but they want to know what you sing in your culture. They want to know your stuff too, and so try to find some stuff there. Ultimately, quality will speak louder than style, so it's not about singing cool music as much as it is about singing it from heart and singing it as well as you can. People really do respond to beauty. Avoid slower pieces in most cross-cultural contexts. Most of the time, slow things just won't go over well unless you're in cathedrals and very concert-like settings. And if you know you're going to be in a beautiful, elaborate setting with great acoustics and stuff, learn a piece or so for that. But don't learn a whole program of that and then expect it to work great on the street corner. So learn things that are mostly winsome and rhythmic, and you will, again, stuff I've learned. Financing, we'll try to get through this. Many trips fail to meet their goals due to failure of initial funding. A lot of times when I have students that are trying to plan trips, the trips fail because they don't have a financial backing, and everybody on the trip's having to pay a lot of money to go, and then you have the people that you really need to go who are not able to go, and then the trip doesn't really fit what it was intended to do. So work on the financing way ahead of time. It affects recruiting. Look at the next section of that. Let's read through that. Trip planners often consume much of the cost of an international trip. Consider being your own travel agent. I've learned through the years that I can make travel arrangements. I can do all kinds of things, and I don't have to hire somebody most of the time the trip cost will double when you have a package deal from some travel agent. It pretty much will double the cost of the trip. So if you want a lot of people to go, plan the trip. Get somebody else that you know who has those skills to plan it. I actually like trip planning. That's something I find to be a lot of fun. But I don't do it by myself by any means. Careful budgeting is a must. Consult experienced travelers. I just came back from this Kenya trip almost exactly on the money from what it was supposed to cost. I was telling somebody here, and they said, I wish you could give a budgeting workshop to all the missions groups at Baylor about how they call and say, we're out of money, send money. Or they come back and they have a whole bunch of money to turn back in. So careful budgeting. Local hosts strongly affect the ultimate trip cost. So when you have local hosts who know where to go and where to take you. There were a lot of restaurants we ate in Malaysia that had I been in charge of the group on the ground, I wouldn't have gone to those restaurants because I wouldn't have known that they were safe. But our local people knew they were safe, even though they might not have looked safe to the rest of us.
Safe means?
You're not going to get something that you didn't come to get. Food safe, yeah, or lodging safe, or whatever the case is. Yeah. Different cultures have different financial expectations. Some cultures are expected to pay a lot and give to everybody who does anything for you. Other cultures want to give back to you. They want to say, oh, let us treat you. And so it's very different to know the culture and know how they respond. And so because of that, it costs more to travel in some places. Consider lower level hotels that are not so expensive because you really don't want somebody to do a cross-cultural experience and live in a way that people really don't live in that culture. So if you can go with something that's not so posh, I just almost refuse to take people to another culture and only stay in expensive hotels. I just don't think that's what we go for. If it is, those people need to stay at home. Okay. Safety is paramount, and you mustn't compromise safety. Know people who know people. Important. All right. As we close down, creating an itinerary, best practices. Don't apologize for having fun on the trip. There's no need for you to apologize for going on a safari when you go to Africa. Absolutely. You would be dumb not to do that if you're in a place where that's a good thing. Buy things. Encourage people to buy things because you're helping people when you buy things. That's okay. Alternate difficult days with lighter days. So a day that's very intense and you deal with a lot of things that could cause culture shock, the next day needs to be a light day. And you need to alternate those so that you're not constantly in high pressure experiences. Allow for returning to safe lodging each day. When people can return to something that's safe after they've been in something that feels challenging to their worldview, then they can process it better in a safe place. Safe meaning something familiar. They don't feel threatened in the environment.
Did you go camping in some of the places?
I have been camping in...
did you take... Is that where they lived? Where you lived?
Yeah, we've done that before, yeah. But I didn't do that with this older group. Yeah, but I might do it again with men's choir guys.
But it was a safe feeling.
Yeah, and we would have to have plenty of people there that know the culture, and you really, really got to be safe. Plan very specifically and then be very flexible. My goal is always you have a plan, but the plan may not work. So it's easier to change the plan as it is to create one on the fly. Generally plan fewer activities than you think are needed if you're a person who wants to do everything like I am. I will always plan too much. Some people may be the opposite. Let's see what else. Do not neglect for shopping, sightseeing, we said that. Ample time for reflection and processing. Those who've been on trips with me know that every night, almost without fail, we take time to talk about what has been done in that day. How have we seen God? How has this day changed your life? What happened today that was difficult? What happened today that was joyful? And then students always say the most important thing was the reflection. Build in time for currency exchanges, visits to ATMs. If you have 30 people and you all have to line up in an ATM, how long is that going to take? It's about an hour of time, and so it takes a lot of time. And then half the cards don't work, and you have to go find another ATM to see if they work. So things like that. Understand traffic challenges. Having a healthcare professional is a really good thing if you can have a healthcare person, really important. But not somebody who's never traveled out of the country. Because that person won't understand the health challenges and might not actually help you. That person might might make people afraid rather than comfortable. Traveling in one large vehicle is always more desirable than several small ones. Always, always travel together if possible, because then you can use the driving time as community building, and it helps so much. You see some other things, packing lunches, minor illnesses, they're just going to happen. Avoid American food as much as possible because it's a cross-cultural experience. I think everybody should have to pay something. I try not to have anybody go on a trip that didn't pay at least $500. My experience almost to the person is if they don't pay something, what happens? They drop out.
Get it.
They drop out. Then what happens to all the money that you've raised for that person when they drop out late in the game? It all is money that someone else could have used, and it goes away. And sometimes you can't retrieve it. So if a person pays a certain amount, they're likely to go on the trip if they've invested their own money, and it's non-refundable. And there should be a time where it's non-refundable.